Hi, thanks for tuning in again. Today we're going to be talking about this bad boy, the 2009 Xserve. Alright, taking a quick tour of the front panel of the Xserve. It's pretty straightforward. We got the on-off button. We got the lock. When this is engaged, USB will stop working, as will FireWire, and you will not be able to eject the drive trays. This is the identifier button, and this will start flashing if there's an issue with the hardware. Front USB 2 port. These are the LEDs for the Ethernet. You got two, so one for each port. These are the CPU status LEDs, and these are just air intake vents. And here is a super drive that does both CD and DVD. Now the drives, this was actually, in my opinion, a step back from the G4 Xserves. They only have 3 drives in this thing. These are proprietary drive modules. There you go. And you cannot just stick any hard drive in here. The limit is 1 terabyte per sled. So with just 3 terabytes, there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do with this. You can make a software RAID out of these drives. You can also have, if your Xserve has this module in it, the SATA board that the drives connect to, you have a regular one that's in this Xserve, and you have a RAID version as well that automatically RAIDs these drives together. I put a regular board in here some time ago because after a while the RAID battery dies, and it's a real bitch to take that thing out and keep replacing it. It takes a lot of money, and I don't use this thing enough. So I put a regular SATA board in here, and I can use these in a RAID or separately, however I want. Now for the back, we have 2 power supplies. It will run off just a single power supply, but if you want redundancy, of course you want to plug both of them in. We got 2 USB 2.0 ports, 2 FireWire 800 ports, 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, mini display port, and serial. This is the identifier LED. It's also a button, so depending on which side of the rack you are, you can push it here, it will start blinking in the front, or you can push that button in the front, it will start blinking here. When you have a rack full of hardware, this is a very neat feature. This little pull tab here shows the hardware information. This was originally, let's see, a 2.26 quad core single processor, 6 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive, actually 3 and 1 terabyte hard drives, and a super drive. We're gonna change all that. And here we have a quick tour of the inside. This is that SATA board I mentioned. The RAID version has some additional chips and heatsinks on here. This is just a plain board, nothing fancy. You can see the hard drives in there. Plenty of ventilation. Super drive. This is the board that handles all your buttons in the front, the CPU LEDs and all that. And here's a look at the lock mechanism. If you lock this, I'll do it by hand right now. This will flip a sensor here, indicating that it's locked in the front, and now your hard drive modules are stuck in there. You can't get them out unless you demolish the tray. Like I said, USB firewire, that's all locked out as well when it's locked like this. And I believe, yes, even the enclosure panel that I took off right now, that'll be locked in place too. I think that's the little nubs here and here. Let's see if I can show you. Trying to unlock this with my fingers is not easy. There we go. Oh, it's not the nubs, it's a little tab that slides out of the side and locks the enclosure in place. This gray module here, this is the fan array. I forgot how many fans are in there, but we're going to find out once we pull it apart. This is just a piece of plastic to funnel the air. The majority of the air will come out of here and here. This is where the second processor would be. The RAM doesn't get as much airflow on both sides, but enough to keep it cool. Here we have the drive, I forgot the word. The power supplies. Redundant, you got two of them. One of them fails. While the server is on, you just yank it out. Out with the old, in with the new. You can also run this off a single power supply. If you do that, this little thing will close up so that dust and all that stuff can't get in the wrong end. And you can just run it like that. I am probably going to put this on the shelf. Wrap it up, box it up, and put it on the shelf. One power supply for me is enough. I don't need that kind of redundancy, and I would prefer not to have both of them die on me in case of a serious power spike or some kind of short. And it will save me about 5 watts not running this. So that's probably what I'll do. Sorry. Here we got one CPU. This is the quad-core 2.26. I think right now this has 6 gigs of RAM. I never changed that. There we go. These are the PCIe risers. The PCIe is actually on the board, but it's redirected with this riser so that you can put a card in this way. It has two of them. X16 for both of them, and I will be putting cards in both. Now I'm not sure, I believe this is the graphics card. It's nothing to write home about. It's a very basic one. I will not be putting in a bigger graphics card because this will be running headless anyway. The current card is good enough for me. If I need a display, whatever this card outputs is good enough. And there we have it. We're going to be pulling this apart, and well, let me get set up and I'll show you why. Now, like I said, I have some upgrades planned. Since the internal storage is very limited, I'm adding a PCIe card that has both eSATA and USB 3.0. Even if I would need it, 2 internal SATA ports, so I could hook up an SSD or something. Should be pretty cool. Second is a 4 gigabit fiber card. I have the modules as well. This I got because I want this to play at some point with an Xserve RAID. The only way to communicate with those is through fiber. So I got that. This is a heatsink, which will go on top of this processor. The processor is nothing fancy. It's the same as what it already has, 2.26 gigahertz, only I'll be adding a second one. These, just like the Mac Pros, have delidded processors. These are lidded. Now, I have been told that this thing can take both delidded and lidded processors. So we're going to find out. Going to add some more RAM. And here, of course, we have the logic board that has to be replaced because the board in here currently doesn't have the physical socket for the second processor or the RAM. you can rewind the video to check that out. Apple, however, sold service parts for the Xserve, and it was too much of a hassle to have service parts that had both one socket and two sockets. So every service part for these, as far as I know, has full socket support for 2 processors, 8 slots of RAM, and all that. So I picked this board up, I think it was 30 bucks on eBay, sealed in the box, all the paperwork and documentation with it. So all this should make this machine about twice as powerful. And with the external storage capabilities it'll have, this will make a very nice file server yet. Now what you're hearing right now is just a single power supply. As soon as these things receive power, the power supply will always be on. Even if you only have one connected, the second power supply, if it's in there, will spin as well, drawing power from the first power supply. Now the Xserve is the loudest during the startup. Once the operating system loads, after a few minutes it will settle down. But this is pretty much the sound level you can expect when running an Xserve. Of course, if you put more strain on it, the fans will ramp up and it can get real loud real quick. I'll cover that later on in the video. Now I currently have this configured. These two are a striped RAID, so the operating system resides on these disks, to speed things up a little. And this is a storage drive. Let me log in, see if we can quiet this thing down a little. This is one of the reasons the Xserve is not for everybody. Of course, the noise level prohibits you from putting this under your bed in the bedroom as a server or anywhere close to where you eat, sleep, or drink, or, live. But if you can stick this in a basement that is somewhat air-conditioned, then this still makes for a very nice server. But we'll get into all that. I don't know if the camera picked it up, but the fans are ramping down. It's getting pretty close to an idle state. And at this point it's drawing about 155 watts, which is pretty significant for a piece of hardware that's basically not doing anything right now. Alright, the current sound level, that's what you're going to be dealing with 24/7 if you run this thing on idle. So it will get noisier as you add more load to the system. I love this sound, but I'm a nerd, so like I said, it's not for everybody. I will reposition the camera. You can watch me install and benchmark and do all this stuff while you enjoy some hopefully good tunes, and then we're going to start the upgrade process. Before I shut this down to start the upgrade, I want to see how it handles some load and what the temperatures are like. So we turn to prime 95, the only real way to stress test the system, and we're going to torture test it. Let's see. Let's do a blend test. All 8 threads. Currently, the processor is holding steady at about 29 degrees Celsius, or, depending on what you like, 84 Fahrenheit. I'm going to stick with Celsius going forward. Blowers are running about high 5,000s up to 6,000 RPM, which is considered idle. Let's start this test and see what it does. Fans are kicking up. See if I can make that graph a little bigger. Temperature is now getting up to 40 degrees Celsius. 10,000 RPM. If it wasn't noisy already, it sure is now. This one should really go after the processor. Now a Mac Pro, even though it is designed to be very efficient when it comes to cooling, would be way hotter by now, even with the same processor. So what's the deal? Well, this thing is designed even better. Let me zoom out here. One of the reasons they sacrificed the hard drive compared to the G4s is these two massive air intake pipes. And wow, you can really feel it. You saw the heatsink earlier. It's pure copper with aluminum fins. The air is being blasted straight from the pipe through the processor. It's really efficient. Even now I'm just coming up on 50 degrees Celsius and it's winter. My heater is on, so it's not exactly cool in here. Let me see if the camera will pick up on the sound. You can really hear the air being sucked in through there. Let this run for a bit and see where it tops out at. Even though the temperatures went up to 54 degrees Celsius, the fans stayed pretty low, around idle. Not bad. Now this is way more continuous maximum load than I would ever put on it with the stuff I'm going to do, so I'm pretty happy with these temperatures. Hopefully they will improve once the new processors go in with some fresh thermal paste, and yeah. This will do quite nice in my basement. Now it's time to take this thing apart, clean it out, explore a little, and start the upgrade process. Before I get started on this, I was told, as I mentioned earlier, that regardless of the CPUs being lidded or delidded, it should work. Now before I put this new board in, I want to test that, because there's a lot of smart people in the Xserve group that know a lot more than I do, and they were right about this parts board having 2 sockets and all that, but I'm not sure about putting lidded processors in here. So before I put this board in, excuse the noise, break the seal on this, brand new board. So before I put this in, I want to make sure that the processors fit and that the heat sinks sit flush. So here we go. Everything as it should be. CPU socket covers taped on still. We got 12 RAM slots. This thing is gonna scream. I do have to transfer over the graphics card, the PCIe risers, but that shouldn't be a big deal. It even has a new battery on it with a plastic tab to put it in action once I remove this. So let me grab the processors, get it all unpacked, and then we're going to give it a try. I got 4 of these processors from a guy on Facebook. His name escapes me at the moment, and my goal was to test these inside Mac Pros with liquid metal thermal paste and see, you know, oh crap, they are delidded. Never mind, I am all set. I don't even have to worry about lids or no lids, because they are already delidded. Well, now I feel stupid. I've never actually opened these before. That is awesome. So, let's take these socket covers off. Wow, they're on there tight. Take these chips, put them in. There we go. Now I already have one heatsink, so I'll have to take apart the old one first, transfer over some parts, but at least now I know that I don't have to worry about lids, and this should be a very smooth upgrade. I'm going to clean these processors a little, get this out of the way so we can start taking apart the Xserve and take it from there. Now, I've never actually taken one of these apart before, so this should be interesting. I should have all the right tools, but if I don't, I won't find out until I'm in this thing. So I'm going to be adjusting the camera angle as we go to make sure you get the best view. But here we go. By the way, I am not grounded. I'm not using a grounded mat. It is cold outside and I'm wearing flannel. So this is a very bad idea. Do not do this. Make sure you ground yourself, or at least, you know, don't wear socks on carpet, any of that stuff. Don't be stupid like I am right now. With that said, let's go. I'm gonna just take it all apart. Even the stuff that doesn't have to come off, I'm gonna take it out and blow it out with some compressed air. Make sure I have a clean system to work with when it's all put together. These are the 2 power supplies. Let's see, these risers are screwed in 2 screws each. Phillips here, Phillips there. Phillips for the fan array. I should be good with just the Phillips, which makes sense because Apple wanted to make these things serviceable as quick as possible, because if the board fails, you don't want significant downtime swapping in a new board, of course. So let's see. This pops right out. So here's one of the PCI risers. Let me make sure I got that in frame. It's basically just an extension card. It's exactly the same port, only they needed it at a 90-degree angle. So I wonder if this can be repurposed in a Mac Pro somehow. Should be interesting. Put that aside. The screws in the back are captive, which is also very considerate from Apple. You know, if you lose a screw in a rack in a data center, you're pretty much screwed. So they thought this out pretty well. Same as the other one. They're both X16 full speed. Let's see, here we have the graphics card. The graphics card, by the way, is a GT120, same as you had in the 2009 Mac Pro, that little one-slot gray graphics card. I think they call this a mezzanine. It's not much to look at. I don't even know if it has the same amount of VRAM as the card you would find in a Mac Pro. I don't think so. But this could use a little bit of dusting as well. I'll be putting this back in because this is more than enough for my needs. All right, let's take the RAM out. I'm gonna have to look up what the best configuration is to put the RAM in, because I don't have enough modules to fill all the slots. So I'm sure there's an order to follow. All right, no more screws there. All right. For the CPU, I do need a different screwdriver. Oh wow, that's in there. Wow, that is super tight. I can see there is maybe a 2-3 millimeter clearance between the highest point of this airflow cover and the heatsink. So I think the guy on Facebook was right. You can put lidded CPUs in here and not get into trouble, which is good to know. Because at some point down the road, I'll be upgrading these processors to something faster, and it might be easier to find them lidded instead of de-lidded. So it's nice to know that I can. Alright, all the screws are out. Let's see. It lifts right up. And as you will find on the Mac Pro as well, the CPU sticks to the heatsink. Now I could use this chip. Actually, I might as well, instead of using 2 other ones. There we go. Interesting, they use thermal pads instead of thermal paste, and there really isn't any left on the CPU. Now the one issue I might have is that I only have one of these spacers, so I might have to harvest one of these from another Mac Pro to make sure that I don't get into trouble tightening this down. Put that to the side. Switch back to Phillips and take all this stuff out. He's captive as well. Interesting. No, these are not captive. Cover, 5 screws, pops right out. Surprisingly clean. I think this server saw a lot of runtime before I got my hands on it, so I expected a lot more dust. Now before I forget, I'm going to grab one of those CPU covers, see if I can find one, and then I'll resume the recording and feed my cat. Okay, I haven't been able to find that CPU spacer yet, so that might be a problem. So I'll keep taking this apart further for now. You do not have to take the fan array out, because the board sits in front of it, but I want to, so I can clean it out a little. Now there's 2 Phillips captive screws on each side. Oi! Oh, you bastard. Hopefully I'm not stripping them. That would really suck. There we go. And this should lift right out. There we go. Beautiful. This is it. The noisemaker. You got 14 fans, intake and exhaust, all in one module. And these two are not as dusty as I thought they would be. I'll still be cleaning these out with some compressed air. Looks impressive. Nice. Let me put this off to the side here. Now, here we have the communication cable with the front panel. Let me see if that's in frame. This panel, the buttons, the LEDs all connect through this cable with the board back there. Let's see if I can figure this out. Alright, 2 pull tabs. And they taped it to the side of the power supply. So hopefully this tape will stay somewhat intact. Nope, it doesn't. So we're gonna have to put some new adhesive tape on there. Here we go. We can hang this off to the side because we don't need it actually. Let me see if I can stick that in here. There we go. Keep that out of the way. And then there's the flex cable for the SATA card, which is also taped to the side with actually a hell of a lot more tape than the other cable. Do I have to take this out? I might be able to slide this in sideways. This connects to the board there. Alright, let me try to zoom in on this a little. There we go. Now the board is pretty dusty, so I expect to... Oh, I did expect some dust underneath the board, but Apple sealed it. Very clever, Apple. Very clever. I wish you were just clever with your current products. There's another flex cable here for the optical drive. Actually, let me just grab a little bit of tape to keep all that stuff out of the way. That rattling you hear is my air conditioning vent in the background. I've been trying to keep that off so it wouldn't mess up the recording, but it just got way too cold in here, so I have to. My cats are complaining. So excuse the noise, it will stop shortly. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Phillips screws hold the board in place. Let's see. These appear to be captive as well. Are they? Does the new board have the screws in it? Yeah, it does. Okay, so the new board comes with the screws on it. So I don't have to worry about these. There we go. And the AC turned off. Perfect. Now what's funny is that Apple made a big deal since the very first Xserve G4. They made a very big deal how you could just slide them out of the rack and service them. The thing is, when you slide these out of a rack, let's say you have a bunch of them stacked, or you have other stuff stacked on top. When you slide them out of the rack, they only slide this far. Can you see what I'm doing on video? No? They only slide out this far, which means you can service the fans, the optical drive, and the SATA board, maybe. The thing is, if you have stuff stacked on top of here, you can't get the top cover off, because it needs clearance to lift it off. So you would still have to take the server out of the rack to properly service it. So I think it was marketing gimmick that doesn't actually serve a whole lot of purpose in real life. Because you can already access the hard drives without even sliding it out of the rack. And all the other important stuff is in the back of the computer. Alright, all the screws are loose. It's being held to the board with several connectors. We got the connector, can we see this? Yeah, connector here that looks like power, connects to the power board. We have the status light and the ports that come through the back panel. So I'm not sure what the best way is to take this out. I might have to remove one of those flex cables. So actually, before I destroy something, let me just pull up the tech guide and take a quick peek, and I'll be right back. Well, I'm glad I looked at the guide, because I have to take this thing apart a lot further just to get to the board. The SATA board has to come out as well. So let's do that first. Move this cable up here. Tape it down so it stays out of my way. There we go. Let's see, so this flex cable has to come off. I'll sit there. How many screws here? Just one? Probably have to eject the drives so they don't hold the backboard in place. Alright, let's see if it really is just one screw. Same captive screw. One connector here. Ooh, that is a very, very stiff cable. Oh dear, I might need some pliers for this. That is in there. Ooh. There we go. Alright, cable is loose. Now we should just have to slide it and lift it up. slide it, and it's not lifting up. Why is that? There we go. And I have to put it back in at an angle. Gotta remember that. Put the board aside over here. Then there is this power connect board. I'm sure it has an official name, but I don't know it. The power supplies, let me see if you can see. Yeah, the power supplies connect here. This feeds power to the drives. This feeds power to no, that doesn't connect to there. I don't know what this is for. It might be an unused connector for the RAID board. Oh right, this is where the RAID battery would sit. And here you have power to the board. So if this tiny board breaks, you're in trouble. So without this, you got no Xserve. Wiggle that right out and lift it up. There we go. Doesn't look like much, but without this board, you got nothing. Nice amount of dust, have to clean that. Put that there. Now I should be able to slide the board right out. Should. Lift it up, pull it towards me. And these flex cables are going to be a problem, I think. There we go. And here we have the old board. Position this so you can see. There we go. Now, as you've seen before, the physical sockets for the RAM and the second processor are not there. So the only way to turn this into a dual processor is to either solder these sockets and all the missing chips on yourself, or just get a service part board for 30 bucks on eBay. Now, of course, I will be saving this board. It's always good to have spare parts. And even with the board being sealed on all the edges, there's still a decent amount of dust in there. So let's clean that out real quick. Put it at an angle here. This flex cable is going to mess me up. I'm going to have to tape it down. I'm gonna go figure this out. I'm not gonna bore you with it, but I will tell you how I eventually got it in there. So I'll be right back. Well, the board is in. I was on the right track. It was the screws messing me up. I unscrewed them. I'll show you on the old board here. I unscrewed them, but the black plastic still held them in place. I had to push them out. That way they weren't getting stuck on. Ooh, some trouble focusing there. You get the idea though. I had to pull this out so that I could slide the board, which I did. It is now in, and I can start putting everything back together. First I'm going to set up so that I can do some cleaning of the processors, the fans. I still have to find that CPU spacer, else I can't even continue. So be back. Now I have here a CPU board from a 4,1 Mac Pro that has fried sockets, or something is wrong with them. So I'm keeping this thing for spare parts, which comes in very handy now because I need one of those plastic spacers for the CPU. Let's have a look. And there we go. Hopefully these are the same in the Mac Pro as they are in the Xserve. So we'll find out when we put it all together. Alright, everything that needed cleaning is pretty clean, so we can start putting this thing back together. Okay, now before we put in the PCIe cards that I want to put in, it's easier to put them in with this bracket out. It just saves a lot of hassle. So we're going to do that first. Take these covers off, which are going to come in really handy in my Mac Pro that needs some extra ventilation. Then we're going to grab the first card. Let's see. This is going to have the most heat because of the graphics and probably the North Bridge. And the card that runs the hottest is the fiber card. So I'm going to put the USB 3 card right there on top of the graphics card. Now hopefully my camera focuses on this. Slides right in. Put the screw back with one hand. That should be interesting. There we go. And we have one module ready to go. Now it is going to be upside down, but that hardly matters. Let's see. Put the two captive screws back in the back panel. And that takes care of one. I'm going to do the same with the other riser. Now, these things are all super thin aluminum, by the way, so handle them gently. So, not like that. Here we have the second card. There we go. I say there we go a lot. I like saying it. I don't know why. And here's card number 2. I'm not going to be using this one just yet, but it's nice to have it in there when the time comes, and I do need it. Line it up, click it down, and screw it in. And there we have it. 2 PCI cards ready to go. Here comes the fun part. It's time to put in the processors. Now I cleaned these with alcohol earlier. That's one. That's 2, and now we need these little plastic spacers. These pretty much make sure that the heatsink sits balanced on top of the processor, because it doesn't have that internal heat spreader like you would with a lidded chip. Alright, those are in. I'm going to grab some thermal paste, adjust the camera, and then we'll put this thing back together. Okay, so because the processor was able to keep itself pretty cool, at least cool enough for my liking, with those thermal pads on it, I'm not going to waste my best thermal paste on this. I'm just going to go with good old Arctic Silver. Come on, focus. Focus. It's not focusing, but you know what Arctic Silver is. It's probably a lot easier to do this with the chips out of the Xserve, but what the hell. There we go, little pebble. Now, because you're never able to put the heatsink on completely level, that paste is going to smoosh several ways before you tighten it down. So I am a big fan of taking a little spudger and just spreading that stuff around evenly. Now you don't have to be too worried about the edges of the die, because as much as you spread it out, that heatsink sits on so tight, it's going to squish it all out anyway. Alright, I cleaned these heat sinks. There is a temperature sensor cable. Do not forget to connect that, because you do not want to hear an Xserve scream. It's a horrible, horrible sound. Which I might actually be able to demonstrate once we fire this thing up. with some fan control software. It's a sound you never want to hear come from an Xserve. Alright, crisscross. And my guide on how far to tighten this down is going to be how tight the original was, which is just beyond finger tight. Alright, and I find that something is wrong. You can't see it from this angle, but this thing is not sitting flush at all. It's at an angle. Well, it is sitting flush in the heatsink, even though it's not focusing. The heatsink is not warped. These standoffs, found the problem. There's these little standoff rings on the posts, and one of them is missing. I hope I didn't crush the socket. Let's see if I can harvest one of those rings from the Mac Pro CPU board. If not, I'm gonna have to fabricate something. Well, that only took about 5 seconds. I got this from the Mac Pro board. Put that sucker on. I thought these things were kind of captive, but they screw on. So if you go this route, definitely check and make sure that your board has these rings. I don't know if I crushed my socket when I tightened this, but make sure that those rings are in place. Now these aluminum fins are very, very thin, and you can easily crush them if you grab them too strong, so be careful with that. Crisscross loosely. See? Oh yeah, much better. And then tighten it down. A little past finger tight, just the way the original was. Should be all it needs. Alright, I'm happy with that. Put the cable back in. And we move on to CPU number 2. turned on by itself. Alright. And it's about to scream. I think the RAM is not in the right configuration. You got the blinking LEDs over there for the CPU. So there might be a CPU issue, there might be a RAM issue. I'm gonna have to figure this one out and get back to you. I really hope I did not crush the CPU socket when I tightened that thing down. But I'm gonna figure this out off camera and hopefully come back with some good news. It was not the battery, but at least it's one more thing to rule out. Ooh, it's not happy now. I promised I would let you hear this. Here it is. If your Xserve ever gets this loud, something is wrong. Whew, that cleared the dust off my desk. Let's see. Let's try that. All right, now we have status lights there. We got one there. We got status LEDs behind all the RAM slots. We got a bunch of them over there, whole rows of them over here, and some in the middle over there. So I'm gonna have to really dive in, see what they all do, see what they all mean. To be continued. And we're back. So I looked up the activity light blinking in the Xserve user guide. If they were blinking like they were here, one of the memory modules is bad. Now, even though none of the memory status LEDs showed me anything wrong. But there's one rule that I ignored. It's a very, very important rule. You want to look for the fault in any system whatsoever. Doesn't matter if it's an Xserve, a G4, a G5, a Mac Pro. If you want to find the issue in any server or in any product, look for the OWC sticker. That's always what's going to be wrong with it, because they sell shit. Anyway, I pulled some RAM out of my 2009 Mac Pro, so it now has 8 gigs. Which absolutely work, because 3 of these modules were already in here, and this one came from a Mac Pro that I used not even 2 days ago. All the status LEDs checked out, so it should boot. Let's find out. That's a good sign. We got an image on the screen. Drives are spinning up. Progress. I like it. One processor is getting warm, one is not. So this processor might not be working. We'll see when we get into the OS. Let's have a look. Only one processor recorded. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there we go. One 2.26 gigahertz, which is ironically the one I thought that I crushed is working. CPU B is not working. I also forgot to serialize the board. I have to do that as well. I'm going to do that first, and then we'll come back to this and see if we're in business. Okay, we put the serial number back on the board. I don't think it'll matter much when it comes to the processor, but it has to be done either way. Okay, something ain't right with that processor or one of the memory modules after all. It's going to be hard to show you from this angle, but two red lights for those RAM modules, which is a communication problem with the processor or with one of the modules, which I highly doubt. But we'll see what the Mac has to say about it. Put the modules in the right configuration. Interesting. It's only seeing two of the modules, so that is not ideal, but at least it is seeing both processors. Two 2.26. For a total of 16 cores. Well, 8, but you get 16. So I think something is wrong with the pressure of the heatsink on CPU B, because after I tighten it, it starts booting up. booting up, and now it's having an issue with the RAM. So, let's have a look. That side is as tight as it gets. This one has a few turns left. Now, according to Apple, this is the proper configuration for 4 modules and 2 processors. So, let's give it one more shot. No more red LEDs on the RAM, so I think it was just not tight enough. Me being overly cautious, probably. Getting warm, so it should be working as it should right now. Take a look. Memory slot utility. The memory modules are installed in the recommended slots. There you have it. Dual processor, 8 gigs of RAM total. We are in business. Now, I do need more RAM, but I'm not too concerned about that right now. At least processor-wise, we are in business. And this one can go in the trash. Now, one more thing I want to test. I took the PCIe cards out while I was troubleshooting, and I put those back in. See if the server recognizes them properly. Then I will put it all back together, grab some dinner, and when I come back, which for you is just going to be 2 seconds later, I will run the benchmarks and see if we gain anything. Okay. Hope you can hear me over this noise. We have the 4 gigabit fiber channel card. It's showing up twice because it has 2 ports. And here's the USB card. I forgot how to set up a fiber card in Snow Leopard, but I'm sure I'll figure that out. For now though, everything is working as it should. And the upgrades are done. Better. Okay, as I said, I'm gonna grab some dinner. Next frame, I'll be back. We're gonna stress test this a little, run some benchmarks, and explore a bit more in depth. And we're back. I have some food in me, cleaned up a little. Let's dive right in and start with a benchmark. Turn on the power, would be a good idea. Whoa, nice. Save these results. That's number 2. Put them side by side for a second. Not bad at all. I actually took a little bit of a hit on the memory performance. This might be related to having 3 modules on one CPU earlier, and now I only have 2 per CPU. So that's the whole dual triple channel thing, which I don't care too much for. I don't need blazing fast speed, I just need enough cores to handle multiple tasks that I'll be throwing at this. I might put in some more memory later and test it out, but for now, I'm very happy with this. We went from 7,000 to 11,000, almost 12. So this is not bad at all. For a total of, let me see, 40, 45, 60 bucks. Not bad. Now, we're going to be stress testing this stuff for a while. Good old Prime 95, of course. "16 threads. Let's go. I would say it passed the testing with flying colors. The hottest it got on CPU B was 53 Celsius. CPU A stayed under 50, which is temperatures I'm perfectly happy with. Of course it did get a little loud, but that is to be expected. I would say this upgrade is done. I'm happy with the results. I'm going to put this back in the rack so we can talk some more about this without the noise in the background, or actually in the foreground. So I will be right back. Now, before I move this thing back to the rack, I wanted to do another test with some more memory. So I put some additional modules in. It's now running 24 gigabytes, spread over 8 modules. So we're pretty much at the same as we were before. Let's save this one. I think that's just a 100-point difference. Almost exactly a 100-point difference. Now I did gain a little bit more memory bandwidth performance, but I don't think this is related to adding more of it. Because they're almost the same. Now I'm going to remove one module on each side and run the test one last time. I took 2 modules out and we're now running at 20 gigs of memory. There you go. Theoretically, Geekbench should be a lot faster now. So we'll see if it makes any significant difference. There we go, we went up a little bit again. Save this, that's number 4. Compare with the last one, we went up another 100 points. So, comparing it with the very first one, we're still not back to the memory performance we had when we had a single processor. Interesting. But for my, and I would say pretty much any other application, having more memory is definitely more important than having 100 points extra in Geekbench. Trust me, I would rather have 24 gigs in here than 20, even if it means being 100 points slower on Geekbench, and probably not slower at all in real-world applications. So, I decided to wrap it up. I don't really have anything else to talk about in regards to this Xserve. It will be featured again in future videos, as I have some pretty big plans for it. One of the biggest considerations when running an Xserve in your house, or well, it's not really that important in business, but in your house is it worth it? Is it worth it? It's going to take an amazing amount of power to run your Plex, you know? So I ran some numbers before and after the upgrade, and just to let you know what one of these things uses. When it's off but connected, you're looking at about 13 to 17 watts of power. As you can hear behind me, the power supply is always on, and if you have 1 or 2 connected, you know, a little bit more wattage. When this thing starts up, which should only be, you know, occasionally, because a server typically runs all the time, you're looking at a peak of 220 watts when you're running as a single processor. After the upgrade though, this thing takes up 285 watts just to start up. Single processor, you're looking at 150 to 170 watts when it's idle, not running any major services, not a lot of connectivity. After the upgrade, I forgot to check the idle state, probably a few watts more. I did put moderate load on it, running Prime 95 on 4 cores, and it pulled about 270 watts, which is probably what this would run, you know, doing basic tasks, around 250, 270 watts. Before the upgrade, under full load with one power supply, we're looking at 230 watts. After the upgrade, two processors with one power supply, this jumped up to about 360, 375 watts. That's a decent amount of power. With two power supplies before the upgrade, so one processor, 240 to 265 watts, one or two power supplies. And this thing maxed out, I tested about an hour ago after the upgrades, 387 watts maxed out, with the processors busy with Prime 95, the RAM busy, all three hard drives busy doing a time machine backup. So it does take a decent amount of power depending on how you use it. Now I never expect to max this thing out 24/7. That's insane. But this will be running my security cameras, 8 or 9 1080p security cameras, my Plex library, time machine backup destination for all the computers in the house. So at times this will take probably around 300 watts, 300 or more watts of power. Energy, luckily where I live, is cheap, so you know that is a consideration as well. Take the wattages I just gave you, go to your to the company that supplies your power. They list the price for their kilowatts on the website typically, or on your statement, and figure out if this is worth running for you. If power is not a consideration, or you know you're swimming in dough, you don't care, then of course the second most popular question is can this do anything? It's so old, it's useless. It's, you know, like I said earlier, it can't run or render 4K video. It can't do any of the amazing things that current hardware can do. And my answer is, you're looking at it wrong. This is a 2009 Xserve. It is super powerful, as you saw in the benchmarks. This can run Mojave if you want. You can use DOS-Dude's 1 patcher, DOS-Dude 1's patcher, to put Mojave or High Sierra on here. You can even put a graphics card in here that means anything, and you know you can do some crazy stuff with it, but that's not what this was designed for. This can run a web server just as well on 10.6 as it can, well, probably better than 10.11 or 10.12. This can run a time machine backup destination just as well on 10.6 as it can on Mojave. You know, if you don't push this to have the latest and greatest operating system, and don't rag on it for the stuff it doesn't have, just use it for what it is. This thing is amazing, and it'll do anything you want it to. And if it cannot do what you want it to do, the Xserve is not for you. Simple enough. So I put a fiber card in here, as I intend to do some pretty neat stuff with it. So this will be back in a future video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and see you next time. Now, a big shout out to my very first Patreon supporter, Michael Stanhope. Dude, thank you so much for being a patron. I really appreciate it, and you make content like this and future content possible. If you want to support my videos, my blogs, my other websites, go to my Patreon page. The link will be somewhere in here. I haven't figured YouTube out yet, so the link can pop up anywhere. Just visit that, read about who I am, what I do, and if it's worth a few bucks to you, become a patron. I will mention you in videos, on the blog, on other websites probably in the future, depending on your contribution. And just know that I super appreciate it. Thank you.